Today we'll be talking about the seventh bracha of Shemona Esrei, the blessing of Geula, which is redemption. And in connection, we'll be addressing the Hadarei of Chanukah and the redemption from the tzarot of that time, the difficulties and the oppression then. Okay, the bracha begins with Re'eh ve'onyenu ve'riva rivenu. See, behold in our affliction and fight our battle. Now we're going to mainly focus on this concept. What does it imply when we ask God to fight our battle? And this is an interesting idea, because at the end of the day, who's doing the fighting and whose battle are we talking about? What do I mean by this? Let me start with the beginning of our story and contrast the Geula from the Yevanim to the Geula from Egypt, from Mitzrayim. What happened in Mitzrayim, in Egypt? So the pasuk clearly says about when we were in Egypt that God says, you stand quietly and I will fight for you. This is a verse at the Kriyat Yamsuf, the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, where God says explicitly we should stand by, we're not going to do anything, God is going to do everything for us. Along those lines, we see also the entire time we were in Egypt as slaves, we didn't really fight any type of battle with the Egyptians. When, from the time Moshe Rabbeinu comes to redeem us, it's a dialogue between Moshe and Paro, and Hashem making a number of miracles. But there wasn't a fight. He didn't gather us and, help us, to encourage us to go and pick up our swords and weapons and go fight against Paro. Instead, the entire battle, so to speak, was a battle between Hashem and Paro, through the messenger of Moshe. The commentators explain in a deeper sense what was this whole Geula from Egypt all about. So we notice when Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Paro, he mentions the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that God, the God that's known by the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, this four-letter name, the essential name of Hashem, He has sent me. And Paro responds by saying, I don't know this God of yours. The commentators point out that the truth is Paro admitted years before to knowing God in his dealings with Yosef. He says, who is a wise, understanding man like you, that the Spirit of God resides within you? So they ask, how, if Paro knew about God then, so how is he telling Moshe Rabbeinu that he doesn't know about God now? And the answer is because it's this name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of Hashem, that was not known to Paro, but the name Elokim, that name was known. And Paro did accept that name of God. So when Moshe said, I come in the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of Hashem, the higher level of revelation, he said, this we don't know about. So we have to appreciate and understand what is it that God decided to reveal the name of Hashem, the Yud Kei Vav Kei name, to Paro and really all of the world. And beforehand, the Jews had this knowledge of God's essential name. We see with Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This is part of the true emunah that was given over to Am Yisrael, the belief in the one true God and what that really means in its depth. So they explain that part of the goal of taking the Jews out of Egypt was to specifically make a big show about it, that the whole world should see that God rules over the world and all of nature, and God can do what He wants. And that was why there were specifically open miracles that transcended the rules and laws of nature, so that the whole world could see that God, that created everything, is in absolute and total control over everything and can do what He wants, how He wants it. There was a two-part goal: to instill within the Jews the proper emunah in Hashem. That was one part. We see that at the splitting of the sea, the Jews are criticized for being over the Avodah Zarah. The angels ask, why are you saving the Jews and killing the Egyptians? They are both guilty of believing in false ideas and serving false idols. So we see that the Klal Yisrael also needed chizuk, so to speak. They needed also this awakening. But it was also for the world to know. God had left the world in darkness long enough and said, I will make myself known to the world at this point. And the key part of all of this, as it applies to this point of the Geula and the fight that was fought for us in Egypt, is that God, so to speak, said, this is my fight. You stand back, so to speak, in the audience. You will be part of the spectators. You watch, and this is my fight. This is when I'm revealing myself to all of mankind, that they should know forever that God of creation did not abandon and leave the world and go up to the high heavens, but he's here, active, and involved in every detail. And that's the redemption from Egypt. This we would call a step one, so to speak. Because ultimately, it's very easy to believe in a divine being that is there for you, protecting you, when you can just see him, and he's there, and he's making a mockery of Egypt, and he's making he's doing what he wants with his world, making water stand, making hail turn to fire, making water turn to blood. When you see such open miracles and the divine providence is so apparent, there's no challenge anymore. We know obviously God is standing right by our side. Also in the desert, this 40 years of our 40-year desert stay, like when you go to a hotel, 5-star hotel. We had a 5-star hotel in the desert with clouds of glory, man, water that followed us, beautiful meat, basar. We had everything we needed in the desert. Also, that to bring home this concept that God is there taking care of us from every direction. Now, when we come to the story of Chanukah, we see an entirely different story. We see the Jews in a time of great darkness. They explain that this is a time period where the Torah was translated into Greek, and there were 3 days of darkness. And in general, we see a tremendous confusion and darkness that came across the Jewish nation, the Jewish people, in that many Jews themselves were unclear about what the truth was, unclear about whether it was time to be loyal to the old ways, so to speak, of Torah, or to go with the flow, to go with the new ways of Greek philosophy and ideology, and unfortunately, idol worship. And many Jews went in that direction. We call them the Mityavnim. They became Greek externally, although obviously they continued to be Jewish with a Jewish neshama. They decided to adapt the ways of life and thought of the Greeks. And there was this civil conflict, I'll call it a civil war, between the old traditional Jews that were religious and kept to the Torah, and those that decided to be modern. It's funny, if we look around today, we actually can find the same debate, the same fight going on till today. What happened as a result is the Greeks decided to really come hardcore on those stubborn Jews that wanted to stick with their belief and practice of Torah, making it illegal, and starting to persecute and kill thousands and thousands of Jews that were determined to stick true to their Torah. Till at one point, the Hashmonaim, Yochanan, Kohen Gadol, Matasyahu, this was his son, he picked up the sword and began a fight with him and his sons. Yehuda HaMaccabee, one of the most famous military leader of this group, five boys against a whole army. They of course got other Jews that were loyal and willing to sacrifice themselves, but we were talking about a small band of people that waged a war against the Greek army, ultimately facing an army of about 40,000 people, and also smaller battles that we have to add to that number. Miraculously, this small group of persistent, devoted, self-sacrifice, willing to sacrifice their life people, continue to fight against all type of natural odds. It went on throughout a course of years. It wasn't a couple of day fight like we merited against our enemies recently, the 6-Day War. And throughout the fight, the Greeks still, they were determined to try to crush them, thinking, of course, how can we be defeated? And lo and behold, they were defeated. Now, we have to put ourselves in this time and place. What was going on in the minds of people at this time? So, I'm not sure if we all would realize it, but you could have many of the Jews that were already loyal to the Greek rulership and the Greek way of life. Many of those Jews would have looked at the Maccabees, Matasyahu and his children, and those rebels that were hiding in the mountains, causing a lot of problems. Those terrorists, I hate to use the word, but I'm using it just to make a point. They would have looked at them as the bad guys, making trouble, making everything difficult for the Jewish people. We're talking about such a level of confusion that the good guys could be labeled the bad guys, and the bad guys good guys. What's behind all of this? How could there be such a state of confusion? We're talking about a time when the Beis Hamikdash still stood. So the truth is, this is, so to speak, in a deeper sense, almost like the second stage of the building of the Jewish people and the building of their emunah, their faith. How so? We said, going out of Egypt, God made a show and everybody saw him clearly. Ze Eli ve'anvehu. This is my God and I will glorify him. They were able to point to the divine revelation. That's how clear it was to everybody. In the time of Chanukah, there was no longer a clear divine revelation. People were so confused that they started to believe that God wasn't here. It wasn't in charge, wasn't in control. And this is part of the miracle of Chanukah, part of the necessity for this type of battle. This is what it means when we say, we ask Hashem, V'riva rivenu, that we ask in the seventh blessing that God should fight our fight. And so too in the time of Chanukah, really we have to understand that underneath all the confusion, it was God that was really fighting our fight. But not in the way that he did by Egypt, in a hidden way. In a hidden way. You know, we never see the director of a movie or a play, yet without that director, you have no play. God remained the director of all things. Of course, his divine providence covered every detail of our existence. But he did not do what we call any open miracles. The definition of open miracle in this context is a miracle that breaks or transcends the rules of nature. But he was there doing miracles non-stop. And this type of miracle, it's an in-between miracle. It's a miracle that is concealed to a degree. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this type of miracle? And why did God leave us to fight against all these Greek soldiers? Why didn't he just, bring a ball of fire from heaven and take care of them? The answer is that through this type of fight where we don't see God's hand so apparent, it brings us to a higher level of emunah. It brings our faith to a higher level, that we must believe in God's presence even though it's not so apparent. Meaning that there's the fusion of our involvement in mankind and our freedom to choose and our almost opportunity now to build up the courage and the faith to risk our lives against an enemy, reaching a level of belief that God is there with us, even though we don't see him. That's the ultimate level of faith. And that's what it means, that God is really the one fighting our fight. Because those that were true to Torah and true to this faith understood that they were not alone. No 5 people would alone face a 40,000 people army. But knowing that the God of creation, the God of the Jews, is there with us, then anything is possible. But it's built off of that courage and that fearless attack that we saw from the great Hashmonaim, and that turned into the greatest of warriors. And that is the ultimate idea behind the miracle of Chanukah. Because we have a tremendous question that's asked, a very obvious question. Why are we celebrating the lighting of a menorah which wasn't even necessary? It wasn't necessary to provide pure oil to light the menorah. The menorah could have been lit with contaminated oil. It still would have been a mitzvah. We still would have fulfilled our obligation. So why did God make this seemingly unnecessary miracle to cause pure oil, which was enough only for one day, to last for 8 full days? Why? This didn't have to take place. It was a miracle that was almost unnecessary. But according to what we're saying, we can answer a very, very good question. We can answer the question in a very powerful way. Since this type of miracle, the miracle of the military victory of the Jewish people, is a miracle that's not so apparent. It's a miracle that's garbed within nature. So you can have people that are not so sure about a miracle taking place. As a matter of fact, the commentators express this idea in connection with Chanukah, that in the time of Chanukah, even though we won against this mighty army, people did not want to give the praise and give the credit to Hashem. They were willing to deny that fact because of the level of ambiguity, the level of unclarity, because there was no open miracles. Now, I would argue with them, and I'm sure there was such an argument. Come on, how can a couple hundred people or a few thousand people beat 50,000 people? Obviously, God had to get involved. The answer is that the level of doubt and confusion that the Yitzchak can put within the hearts of people was enough that they were denying this miracle. So in light of this, we can appreciate and understand. So what did Hashem do? Hashem took oil that could not burn physically for more than a day and made it burn for 8 whole days until pure oil would come. This miracle shows us that God is doing something that breaks the rules of nature, which again reminds us of the divine presence that we saw in Egypt. Why does it have to happen? So the way I would explain it is that this is really to tell me of the true reality that came before, meaning that God makes at the end of this Hanukkah story a miracle that breaks nature to tell me that the same God that could break nature was really there all along within nature, helping, of course, fight the fight for us and making us victorious over the wicked Yevanim. And that's one way we could explain why this miracle is there at the end. And it's really to teach us about the real miracle, which is the miracle of the Milchama. With this, we answer a very big question. Why don't we celebrate the military victory? Why isn't there enough emphasis on the military victory? The answer is the entire purpose and point of these candles are to teach me about the military victory. So they're very connected now. They're not two separate parts of the Hanukkah story, but really the conclusion of the one Hanukkah story. Now, we, of course, all of these Torah ideas are messages and teachings for us. Specifically, Jewish holidays. We know that Jewish holidays are not about commemorating anything, but reliving the light and the energy and the divine revelation that took place in the time of Hanukkah, which is where the power of these great miracles came from, is re-revealed each year. There's the light that was shining then re-shines again. And we must continue to connect with this message and this idea, strengthening our faith, because if we look around today, there's a lot of doubt, a lot of confusion. But if we realize that just as Hashem, our God, made miracles in those days, so He is here making miracles in these times as well. And we should take strength from this point and try to face the challenges that Hashem is putting before us, because these challenges are opportunities to come closer to Hashem and to come closer to what we've been waiting for so many years. The ultimate redemption may happen speedily in our days.